from the worlds of the Genesis of Androzani Advent Calendar. The December Dump.
Okay, Kellen, why does everyone hate Daenerys' stories?
Because she's Daenerys. Emily Clark as an actress isn't as strong as the others.
Not necessarily, no. It's because they always drag on.
That is true, but...
Yes. Maybe she should set some of the pages on fire. Although that's what D&D did when they changed the story from A Clash of Kings. Anyway, hello and welcome to our next Game of Thrones reaction review. We are now going to start Season 3, and we're going to start the adaptation of A Storm of Swords with Episode 1, which is called Valar Dohaeris. If you want to see our full-length reaction to this episode, go to patreon.com/Genesis of Androzani. Chances are a bunch of other Season 3 episodes will probably be on there at this point as well. We also have early access to videos like this, 24 hours, and we also have a master tab where you can request videos for us to do. So if you wanted to, say, take us out of our series and have us do a video on a certain topic of Game of Thrones you'll be interested in, then by all means, go ahead. Twitter.com/Giandrozani is the social where you get in contact with us, or you do all sorts of fun things. So, now we are beginning Season 3. Callum, what are your anticipations? What are your thoughts on this episode? Going into it.
I think from this season, I think we're going to get more of the Lannisters against the North. I think that will be what this season's more about than it was last season, because I think last season was more to do, in terms of the King's Landing story, was to do with Stannis Baratheon's army and his claim to the throne. So I think we'll have more of that this season, as opposed to how much we got last season. But I don't know how... I think this episode is going to do a lot of establishing, coming off where we left off in the last episode of Season 2, from the finale. There's a lot of stuff it's set out, like Daenerys now. I'm assuming she's left Karth now. Sam beyond the wall, surrounded by White Walkers. Jon being captured by the Wildlings. Jaime Lannister on his way back to King's Landing to be offered for the daughters of the Starks. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yes.
And I'm looking forward to it, because I think I've really enjoyed these last 2 seasons. And I am slowly seeing how good the show got, and I have obviously seen how bad it fell, abysmally, it was terrible, and that's a shame. But I'm looking forward to seeing more of the good stuff, as people claim it to be, these next couple seasons.
Yeah, how do you feel about A Storm of Swords being adapted across 2 seasons?
Well, I think it gives time for everything to breathe. I think there's definitely nothing wrong with spacing out your story and building it up as appropriate for the right amount of time. I think one book over 2 seasons. I know I always hear that the books are really long, so I think...
Well, yeah, especially at this point, A Storm of Swords is much longer than the last 2.
Yeah, if you're doing it over 2 seasons, then I don't think...
And
I
then,
think that's good if you're playing out, yeah.
After A Storm of Swords, the books got so long that George R. R. Martin had to separate the story into 2 books. A Feast for Crows only has half of the characters, and then A Dance with Dragon has the other half of the characters. That's how long it got. And then I believe the next 2 books after that, which he still hasn't done yet, will be the same, where it's half the characters in the Winds of Winter, and then the other half will be in A Dream of Spring, and then at the end of A Dance with Dragons it rounds off with both books, and then I believe at the end of A Dream of Spring it'll be the same, and that'll be the end of the series. Right. But at the moment, The Winds of Winter, which is the next book, is getting so long that he may need to split that into 2 books as well. So it's just ridiculous. Just absolutely ridiculous at this point. But yeah, anyway, that's what we know. We know that A Storm of Swords is being split across 2 seasons, which will give it a lot of time to breathe. That also gives an opportunity for the showrunners to add in any of their own material that they want. As we've seen so far, they have been doing that throughout. Not too much of it, but they did do a little bit of it in season 2, and they did a couple of scenes in season 1.
Yeah, it was more so in season 2 than season
Some
1.
of it worked really well, like with Theon and Tywin.
Yes.
And then other elements were fine, like the Rob and Talisa thing. And then there was one that wasn't good, and that was the Karth one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did cry.
So what are you anticipating in terms of like the changes and the additions with this season?
Obviously, as someone who hasn't read the books, I obviously won't know when the changes occur, but I think when I've noticed things being a bit off, and you point out that there are changes, I sort of noticed looking back on the episode that we would have just watched. I'm like, yeah, that is a bit odd. So I think I'm expecting a lot of self-input stuff from the writers going forward, and I'm not massively looking forward to those parts of the story, because every time they've sort of done it, it's not been
aside from a couple of them. All the changes they made in season 1 were great. All of them. They were some of the best scenes, like the Robert, Baratheon, and Cersei scene. That was great. And like you said, one of your favorite storylines, if not your favorite from season 2, was Theon's, and that was quite different from the books. Yeah. So they can make a success out of it. Yeah,
but obviously the writers have got to be very focused and make sure it all works within the same coherent storyline, which I'm hoping they continue to do for as long as they can.
Yeah. The one storyline that we feel like hasn't worked out as well, though, compared to the others, has been Daenerys's. Do you think it's possible that for you should maybe be able to U-turn this time round?
Yeah, I'm sure I can. I'm sure they can. Like, I think you can, even a story just not being as strong as all the others, I still think you can then turn that around into a really good story. There's no real limit. It's like it wasn't like chaotically bad, so there is no issue that they can't sort of bring it back up to how it was in season 1. Which it
wasn't a flop. I feel it was just a bit generic. And I feel like because we missed out on a lot of those visions in the House of dying from the book, we don't have as much context on her backstory and her family and her future. It's more so just her. She's a very aggressive figure rather than one that's trying to find who she is. It's odd. It's a little bit different, and I think part of that is to do with them converting her into an adult character rather than the child she is in the books, but. Again, like we've said, Dave and Dan don't exactly have all of the brains that Martin has to make a complex character. So it'll be interesting going forward. So anything else you want to say?
Sure.
Anything else you want to say before we begin season 3?
No, I'm ready to go.
All right, let's begin Valar Dohaeris.
Starting off where we left off, I guess.
Brother.
Oh. So one of the two that left him. Oh. Is that the one with the long hair?
No. It's a different one.
Oh. Oh. I thought it was for a second. Uh-oh. Ooh. Hello, ghost. Hey, I haven't seen you in a while.
Everyone you've ever known will be dead.
Ooh. Was that our first ever cold open, sort of?
Aside from the first episode?
Right. Yeah. So that technically that is kind of new because obviously the cold open is the opening of the show. Damn. And it looked like they all had just fought a war themselves. It sounds like they've added some drums to this as well.
It gets louder every season.
Yeah.
Oh no!
Oh, that's really cool. I like that. Because all fucked. It's like everything is just slightly different, this opening. It's the same but different. And this is new.
Astapor. Boo.
Written for television. That's new.
It's a giant.
Jesus. It's even shaking the camera. Okay.
Too long. Sure you will.
Did I come to the right place? We'll need to find you a new cloak.
The game Beyond the Wall is quite different.
Anakin Skywalker.
I can see my enemies right behind me.
Then I don't suppose you need much room.
Is that a reference to my height?
I expect you'll tell lies about me, about Joffrey.
Any lies in particular?
Tarin Mant and so who's it of who cares?
Cimmerian Trant.
And you're a grub in fancy armour who's better at beating little girls than fighting men. Now, I've no... Much as I appreciate a walk in the sunshine, your lordship, I'm paying you now, which means you can afford it.
Oh, I like that detail. They're rebuilding.
Yeah.
And who could this be? Why, he has no fingers.
Oh god.
Stannis Baratheon.
That was a risk.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone thought you were dead.
Hey, he's back.
And your son?
I want to fuck the queen.
You cannot turn Stannis against her.
Maybe not, but I could carve her heart out.
You could try. And you drink with me on 4 of my wedding days, but I don't ask you for favors.
There's a lot of men. So he's made it all the way to Harrenhal. Oh, I love that shot. That would stink. That would stink really,
Yeah, but yeah, that would
really bad.
full of rot. Jesus.
You'd be seeing Thestrals in full HD. That's hinting that Roose is more on Catelyn's side than... Oh no, on Rob's side than Catelyn's.
You brought a whore into my bed.
It wasn't your bed at the time.
I sent you. Gods have condemned me to watch you waddle about, wearing that proud lion that was my father's sigil and his father's before him. But neither gods nor men will ever compel me to let you turn Casterly Rock into your whorehouse. The next whore I cut in your bed, I'll hang.
Oh! That was brilliant.
I saw your mother not long ago. She's very eager to see you. And your sister.
Hey. Hey, he did see her.
Yeah, of course he did. They finally have a ship. God, it's much bigger now.
Another lovely day in the high seas.
Don't mock them. They're the
Now we get to see it in full view. Dragonstone. I like how they linked Daenerys to that, because that's obviously the Targaryen castle. Oh, here we go.
There you go. So that's getting longer.
Is this the equivalent of a limousine?
As close as it could be.
There's another one.
We should have guards, my lady. Why?
Jeez.
Pardon me.
Oh!
I have others.
Oh. Walking in shit.
What, he was just sat out there the whole time? Was that just a quick 3-minute open discussion?
And approach them with an open heart.
An open heart is what you'll get in Flea Bottom if you're not careful, my dear. Long ago.
Facts become less and less important to her as she grows older. Our lives were never truly in danger.
There were like people died.
By the king's bravery.
Astapor.
What a shot. Oh look! I recognise her.
He begs you attend this carefully, your grace.
That's great.
Oh. No.
Oh.
Tell the good master, there is no need.
Oh.
My master points out that men don't need.
Well, every recruit he. Oh, that's fucking hell. I imagine he gets home and he's just like, fuck! Hello? Nicole, let's go bowling. Open it up. It's an explosion. Yep, it's a poisonous spider. Oh no, scorpion. Whatever it is. Jesus! Oh. Oh, that's disgusting. They subverted my expectations. What the fuck? More magic?
The warlocks.
The honor is mine.
Oh shit! Haven't seen him for a full fucking season.
And as the Lord Commander of Robert Baratheon's Kingsguard. King Robert is
This is interesting.
Okay, Callum, your initial thoughts on Valar Dohaeris?
I thought it was good. Thought it was a good introduction for season 3. I think it reintroduced a lot of characters very well. I think it had a lot of really good scenes. I think like 1 or 2 scenes I thought were very, very, very good in terms of performances. And it left off with a very, very interesting cliffhanger. Yeah, but as a first episode of the season, I think it was good. I think it was quite good.
Yeah, it's pretty solid all the way through, I'd say.
Yeah, it's pretty solid.
It was very entertaining. Well, I lost track of what the time was, and by the time we got to the end, I was like, oh, it's already the end? Yeah.
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 I think it packs a lot in.
It does. It does. Shall we begin with the characters?
Sure.
So at the very beginning, in the cold open, we had Samwell Tarly. Who...
Yes.
Now, I feel like, because the last time we did this, we talked about at the end of Valar Morghulis, about how that scene didn't really make sense. And that obviously then leads into this scene. I feel like this scene actually does make sense by itself. It's just in the context of the last scene, it's a bit strange.
Sure. I think it's not very clear how. I don't think it's necessarily like a massive problem, but it's not very clear like how much time has passed. I'm assuming that he's just run away from the White Walkers. Then it is obviously met by another and attacked, and then the rest of the Night's Watch arrives, who seemingly have fought a battle due to all the blood they are on their
the
faces.
thing is though, if they had kept what happened in the books, where rather than it being like an open like walkthrough, it was like an ambush in the night like it was in the books. This would make more sense because then Sam would be running from them and they hadn't had seen him, and then maybe one of them would have spotted him and chased him down, which makes sense why there was that White Walker that was going after him here. So if they had kept the same logic from the books for the previous scene before this one, then this would make more sense. But because of how season 2 ends, it's a bit weird.
It is very weird. I think the structure of it's really to do with the ending of the last episode of of season 2. It all makes this all seem a bit too much of a coincidence, all these events happening, and it's also very weirdly structured.
Yeah, because it doesn't make sense now why there would be that White that's chasing him when they weren't going to kill him before.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's more at the fault of the final scene of last episode.
I also find it weird how Sam was with 2 of his brothers and then is met up by them with the rest of the Night's Watch, who are seemingly covered in blood, having just fought battle. I think the timeline of that it's really stretching because it all seems like this is all within a certain quick amount of time.
Yeah, it's very weird, and it's also I think it all comes down to the fact that in the final scene of the last season, they wanted to do the whole thing of what does the 3 blasts mean? They want it to be like 3 years for White Walkers, and they run, and then they show the White Walkers a bit in all their glory. But logically speaking, it doesn't really make any sense.
No.
It's very odd. I remember
those are my sort of issues with the opening.
Yeah, I remember because the first time I watched this show, it was very surface level and I missed a lot of detail. But this was the first time that I noticed. I was like, "Hang on, that doesn't make any sense."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the timelines are very odd.
Yeah. It's just weird. I don't know how to explain it. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, and obviously the Walker now wants to kill Sam. It's very odd.
Yeah, so I feel like you have to change either the scene before or this scene for it to make sense, and I would say probably the previous scene would make more sense because then obviously you wouldn't, basically you need to change it so that the White Walkers don't see him. That's what you need to do.
You do.
And you could have very easily had a similar scene to what we got. It's just you need to change it that they don't see Sam.
Yeah. Because
that one detail ruins logic, really. Kind of just makes
it really does.
Yeah. But outside of that, he meets up with Mormont, G.L. Mormont, Rast, Edison, Gren, and the rest of them. And there's obviously that line that Mormont says, we have to get back to the wall, and if we don't stop these White Walkers... And he obviously says that, he asked Sam if he sent the Ravens, and he didn't. And he's like, that was your one fucking job. And he basically says, if we don't stop the White Walkers by next winter, we'll all be dead. And I thought that was a great line to sort of kickstart it, if that whole logical loophole hadn't been made, if that logical jumping through a hoop hadn't been made, I feel like that would have been a great scene to start.
It would have been a good scene to start off, as a cold open,
Yeah. We didn't see them again after that, though. But we did see Beyond the Wall beyond that, because then we saw Jon Snow enter the Wildling camp, and he met Tormund Giantsbane and Mance Rayder.
I thought the whole scene was pretty good for an introduction. For, I think, proper... establishing who the Wildlings are.
Yes.
Sort of how they live their lives on a daily basis and what kind of civilization they have.
There's a giant there.
Yeah, exactly. Because all we've really had is Egret in terms of the character Wildling. Everything else has been sort of...
Well, I mean, I suppose it was...
random Wildlings.
I suppose Lord of Bones, kind of. But we don't...
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. One detail I really like is that if you're a man of the Night's Watch, they call them Wildlings, right? But then from the other point of view, they call themselves the Free Folk and they call the Night's Watch Crows. So it's almost like each side has an offensive word for the other side.
Yeah.
I really like that. I really like that detail of like how the free folk is how they identify as themselves, but the wall people, the Night's Watch call them wildlings, and then they call the Night's Watch crows. That's really cool. A bit of trivia about the actors who played Tormund and Mance Rayder. The actor who played Tormund got coronavirus, but thankfully he's still alive.
Good.
And the actor who plays Mance Rayder plays Aberforth Dumbledore in Deathly Hallows.
Ah.
If you look at his face, you can see it, like in his eyes. But he basically in the Deathly Hallows, he wears prosthetics to look like Michael Gambon.
Yeah.
But yeah,
well, if he was wearing prosthetics, they look very good in that because I wouldn't have known.
Yes, but the one big detail I noticed in the reaction was the game Beyond the Wall is a lot different than it is in Westeros, and I like that. I like the way Jon Snow managed to say the right things to get their trust. That was really clever, I thought. The way he used a true event to his advantage. The fact that, you know, he saw what Craster was doing to his sons and he found out that Jeor Mormont knew what was happening. And because it was actually real, it was an actual event that happened, Mance Rayder had no reason to disbelieve it because he knows who Mormont is. And also the fact that he killed Corran Halfhand meant the plan worked.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean? So I think that scene was a real testament to show like how clever Jon Snow has become. You know, he's become a lot smarter.
Yeah, definitely.
And I like the
and
detail
I think
of
of getting off the Leviathan could have helped as well. Getting understanding how far like she sort of like talks and just like articulates words and stuff. I think it makes sense how like he would be smart enough to know now how to like make sure he doesn't get killed by saying the wrong things.
I also like the detail that the free folk don't bend the knee to Mance Rayder. They chose him, they elected him, you know, it's like a democratic vote, which is interesting because they're known to be savages beyond the wall, but they have the most like the most modern structure in terms of their political like structure.
Yes.
They have a structure that's the most similar to what we have, like a democratic structure, which is interesting. But I really like that the fact that these like 100,000 wildlings all banded together and they all chose Mance Rayder as their leader, even though he came from the Night's Watch originally.
Yeah.
And I like how Jon Snow knows this and he uses that to his advantage to essentially say to Mance Rayder, you know, to make it like, well, I'm not that much different from you. I'm a crow just like you were once. That was really clever. And then you know straight away that Mance trusts him when, obviously, he shakes his hand, but also he says, you need a different cloak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Now that Jon Snow is trusted by the wildlings, he can basically espionage, if you know what I mean, but like he doesn't have to hide. He's gonna, you know, and I also like the detail of him saying, I want to be on the side that fights for the living, in the sense that you can see that Jon Snow, in his heart, he wants the wildlings to fight alongside them because he knows that they're going to need a big army. This is like, I feel like this scene is very much the beginning of the Jon Snow that we get for the rest of the show, very much like wanting to band people together to, you know, save the world from the dead. This is the first time we get it.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose you could almost say he's an environmentalist. But yeah, I really like that scene. It was good.
I agree. I thought it was a very good scene. I thought the dialogue in particular was quite good.
Mm-hmm. And I like how Mance Rayder feels equal to them. He doesn't have like this big seat or like his grand entrance. He's just sitting in the back of the tent, like as if he's anyone else. And that really establishes who he is. The fact that Jon thinks that Tormund is Mance Rayder, because, you know, Jon has only seen Lords of Westeros. I like the fact that Jon thinks that Tormund is because he's sitting in the middle and he's front and center, but the fact is Mance is just at the back. And I like the fact that Mance, despite the fact that he's their leader, he is almost equal to them, which is very interesting. It's quite different from anything else in the world. Yeah, fascinating character. But yeah, overall I thought that was really solid setup. And also the other thing I would note is I really liked the landscape. I thought it looked great. It looked very big, of the whole wildling camp.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was nice.
It's cool. I also like the detail of the children throwing rocks at Jon because, you know, crows killed their fathers. That was also very cool.
Yeah.
I like the fact that this episode links that also to the scene with Marjorie as well, because in a lot of the fathers of the children there also died in Blackwater Bay, so I think that's a nice link. There's a very strong linking towards like children in this episode. There's a lot of children talk. Like there's obviously the bit in the East with them talking about babies being killed for each Unsullied, and then there's also the child warlock as well. So I think that's one thing you can say is definitely prominent. There's a lot of focus on children and their perspective on the world because of events that have happened, and also because, you know, their fathers have died.
Yeah.
Yes, so anything else you want to say about the stuff beyond the wall?
No, I think it was all solid stuff mostly. I think the Jon and wildling aspect of the episode with that scene was very, very good.
Mm-hmm. Alright then, let's move to King's Landing. We obviously have Tyrion Lannister.
Yeah, he had a very interesting time this episode with scenes with Cersei and Tywin. The scene with Tywin in particular was quite brutal.
That was probably my favourite scene of the episode. I loved it. I thought it was brilliant.
I think what it does very well is continually, like, I think like last season, or at least the scenes that whenever they had scenes together between Tywin and Tyrion, I felt like there was like always a mutual like respect somewhere, but I think this scene really does a good job at like proving the sort of disdain
because Tyrion's actually asking for something. Tyrion's actually asking for something this time round. He wants Casterly Rock, which Tywin will absolutely not give to his imp son.
Yeah.
Because it would be a shame on the family.
Exactly.
Because it means that Tyrion would actually be in Tywin's position. You know, he would actually take his place as the primary Lannister, which he absolutely will not let happen.
Yeah. By sort of saying, like, you're an imp and you killed your mother, using stuff like that is continually showing the sort of disdain he has.
You are a spiteful little creature.
Mm-hmm.
I love Charles Dance. Yeah. He's an amazing actor.
He really is. Yeah.
And I really liked how, like, you could tell Tyrion was hurt by it.
Yeah.
I also really like Tywin's sort of when Tyrion talks about, like, you know, I fought on the battlefield of Blackwater, you know, for this family, and I saved the city and all that. And then he's like a little bit of bloody gratitude. And then, of course, Tywin says, you know, if I had roses, I didn't ask for roses to be taken to me for every wound I had. You know, it's like you're not a lowborn, you're not a juggler, you're a Lannister. You don't need to be, you know, applauded. It's expected of you. I like the fact that Tywin is saying to him, it is expected of you to do these great things. Which is completely disregarding Tyrion's disability. The sense that Tyrion didn't choose to be an imp. He didn't choose this life. And it's just Tywin is completely disregarding it.
Yeah, pretty much.
I also like that at the very last moment how, like, he says one more thing, Tyrion turns, and then as soon as Tywin says the word whore, Tyrion turns his head and walks away. He doesn't want to look at him. He's like, the next whore you have, I will hang. Like, Tyrion doesn't even want to look back at him, because as soon as he says whore, he's triggered. Because obviously, if you remember the story he told about Tysha, and how Tywin, you know, had all of his guards rape her.
Yeah.
And that's like one of the reasons that Tyrion hates his father is the fact that he did that to him.
Mm-hmm.
It's like every time his father says the word whore, he gets triggered.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that scene between them was brilliant. I loved it. I thought it was great.
I thought it was very good.
Yeah. And I feel like now Tywin is finally taking his place in like the centerpiece, like in terms of like the storyline. He's becoming one of the main characters now, rather than before where he was sort of on the outskirts. Now that he's actually Hand of the King, he's a lot more important to the storyline now, and that for me is great.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Because now we're going to be getting scenes with Tywin and all these characters that are in King's Landing, which is obviously going to have a lot of tension because Tywin wants to be in control of everything.
Yeah, it does.
Yes. Also, though, with Tyrion, we obviously got that scene with Cersei as well, which I thought was really interesting. I like how Tyrion was, he was in survival mode. He was essentially saying, everyone's out to kill me, and Cersei could very well be there. And I like the fact that the detail of, if you remember in Blackwater, the man who sliced his face wasn't one of the rebels; it was one of the Lannister men. So it's pretty obvious that someone, probably Cersei, ordered to have him killed on the field, or maybe it was Tywin. We don't really know. But it could very well be Cersei, and I like the fact that he's aware of this. He's aware that it could have been Cersei trying to kill him on the battlefield. But yeah, I really like that scene. And then obviously surrounding that storyline, we have Bronn and Podrick. So obviously Podrick interrupts Bronn when he's in the brothel.
Yeah, of course he does.
He's like, get out of this room and I'll fucking kill you. And then obviously, he says it's a matter of life and death, so he has to leave. And then you get that little confrontation between Meryn Trant and Bronn, and that was funny. And I like how that mirrored the scene in Blackwater between the Hound and Bronn as well. And how they almost drew their swords, and then obviously it stopped.
Yeah. I thought it was really funny.
Yeah. And also now that Bronn is Sir Bronn of Blackwater, he's a knight, he has to get paid double. So now Tyrion is having to spend more of his money to protect himself. And I also really like the detail of Cersei and how she is scared about what Tyrion might tell. What, in quotation marks, lies he might say.
Yeah.
And he's like, what lies would that be? Any lies in particular? Very clever.
That's good stuff.
Yes. And beyond that, in King's Landing, we had a brief scene with Sansa and Shae, where they were playing that little game about the ships. So, I like the detail of Sansa. The way she plays the game is she makes up, what's going to happen, and this very much mirrors the game that they played in season 1 with Tyrion and Bronn and Shae.
Yeah.
But it's slightly different, and I like how she says, "Oh, you have to make up something," and then Shae says, "Why don't we just say the truth?" And I like how that is sort of indicative of Sansa's current situation, how she's having to make up things to hide,
Yeah.
And how Shae is basically recognizing this is wrong. But then of course in comes Peter Baelish, aka Littlefinger, who is now tempting Sansa with the information of escape, the fact that he saw her mother, he saw Arya at Harrenhal, that we got confirmation of that. So the fact that he knows that information, and also he's saying, I'm going to be leaving on a ship very soon, and if you're lucky, I might be able to sneak you on quick, but you're going to have to follow my orders exactly. So obviously he's trying to, he's essentially baiting Sansa with escape, to try and get her on at his side, basically saying, I'll
pretty much trying to give her hope.
Yeah. And obviously Sansa is aware of who Littlefinger is and what power he has, so she realizes that if she can find any means of escape, he might be able to help her.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we don't actually quite know yet what mission Littlefinger has, far away. He still hasn't told us. I mean, he has actually said, to be fair, he has actually said what it is, but he hasn't said it directly, and if I know what it is, because I remember when we heard the dialogue of him talking about it, I know exactly what he's talking about, but you wouldn't have known. There was a scene in season 1 where he revealed what he has planned, but it's very vague.
Yeah, it is.
I won't quite reveal which scene that is, but there is a scene in season 1 where he basically tells someone what he has planned, but he's now thinking of executing it here. But I like the fact that he's using that to bait Sansa into a means of escape. The fact that she's desperate to get out. And then in the back of that, you have Roz and Shay, who are, Roz essentially saying, Roz, who we now know is working for Varys as well, and also Varys is in close contact with Shay. So I like the fact that Roz knows who Shay is, because obviously Varys would have told her. Like, do you notice that detail?
Yeah.
And I like the fact that now Roz and Shay are sort of bonding over the fact that they're both whores. They were both whores, and they've both like come to a high power. That was quite cool. And I like the fact of, you need to look out for Sansa, and she says, Shay's obviously, she is already, she's like, I'll protect her. And then Roz says, you need to look out for her with him. Obviously, because Roz knows what Littlefinger is like. She knows how manipulative he can be.
Course.
So I like that detail. I like that detail that Roz, who's pretending to work for Littlefinger in that moment, is doing Varys' work by warning Shay about Littlefinger. That was very clever, I thought. Very good. And then there was only one other section of the King's Landing storyline, and that was the Marjorie-Joffrey section, where Marjorie went to the children of Flea Bottom to... Interestingly, we're talking about, like, throughout the show, we revealed all these different ways people can play the Game of Thrones, right? And, with Jon Beyond the Wall, we saw a very unique circumstance of him playing the game beyond the wall. I like the fact here we see something completely different that we've never seen before, in the fact that Marjorie is playing the Game of Thrones by trying to get all the children on her side.
Yeah.
If you notice that, like, that is very interesting, and I think what that does, if all the children love her, they're going to tell their parents about that, and then that's going to have an effect on their parents. And I think that Marjorie, it's very clear that she wants to get all the common people on her side. It's and I think that makes sense because she was married to Renly Baratheon, because he had all the common people on his side as well.
He did, yeah.
So she wants to use a similar tactic to get them on her side, the same way that Renly did. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
And then I just love that whole dinner table scene with Joffrey, Marjorie, Loras, and Cersei. That was hilarious.
Yeah, I thought that was good.
They're
that was great.
They're just all like... It's funny because each individual person thinks that they're trying to outfool the other person at the table, but the fact is they're all doing it. So it's just really funny. And I don't quite think each character realizes this. Or except, I think the only... possibly the only example of that is I think Cersei realizes that Marjorie is full of shit. But Joffrey doesn't. Joffrey doesn't know this at all. He's being fooled by her. But yeah, the obviously there's that subtext of Highgarden in the Reach, where the Tyrells are from, brings a lot of crops. They are the second richest house because they own all the food, whereas the Lannisters own all the gold. And they're essentially uniting to become the rich faction. Because gold wins wars.
Perfect match in that regard.
Gold and food wins wars. So yeah, what did you think of that whole section with Marjorie?
I thought it was interesting. I think it's interesting to see like what she actually does to sort of like, I guess in the eye of the public, be like regarded highly. Like she's like the kind. She's like a kind person from higher up, which is rare especially within King's Landing, it seems. Which is very different in contrast to Joffrey. But yeah, I also thought that whole scene at the dinner table was quite funny and entertaining. But
yeah, I like the fact that Joffrey when he's in the streets, he's quite confused as to what she's doing and why. He doesn't really understand like what the point is.
Decides to stay there for either a very short amount of time, if Marjorie was in there for a short amount of time, or she was in there for a while and he was just stood there.
Well, no, I'm pretty sure it was a traffic jam. to be fair.
Oh, what? Oh, yeah, true. But that must have been a really long traffic jam.
Oh yeah, I mean, Flea Bottom is very crowded. And it's full of shit and people. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. I like the fact that Joffrey is like, he would have never thought to do anything like this, because those people don't mean anything to him.
Yeah, because he doesn't care.
Yeah. And he's like, in his mind, he's just sort of thinking like, so I'm going to be marrying this.
Someone who's kind.
I also really like the smug cheek of Joffrey saying that Cersei's getting old.
Yeah, I noticed that, yeah.
And I think it's evidently clear, because in that very same scene, Cersei talks about how Joffrey is his father's son and how he shares his father's bravery on the battlefield. Obviously, you know, that's mocking Joffrey and how, you know, Robert would always go into wars with a big axe, whereas Joffrey was a coward in Blackwater. And I like how the rebuttal to that is the kind of thing that Robert would say to her. Like, woman, you're getting old.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
And you can very clearly see that Cersei is getting triggered by her son because she's reminding her of her late husband. Right, let's move on to a scene that you probably didn't maybe not expected to see. And that was the survival of Davos Seaworth, who survived the wildfire. Obviously his son did not, which was a big part of the storyline. I really liked that part of it. But I think one of my favourite bits of sort of direction from the episode was obviously, you know, he sees the ship and the ship comes to him. I love the whole thing of which king do you fight for? And obviously in his mind he says, if I say the wrong king, I might be killed. And I like the fact of, he says, the one true king, Stannis Baratheon, and then you see the guy smile, and it's like, oh, that's brilliant. I loved that.
Yeah, I thought that was good. It was very... That's just a little part was like quite tension-filled, because it could be one way or the other, whatever he says.
Yes. So, of course, obviously that ship was being piloted by Salador Saan, who was the pirate who sold Stannis the ships in Season 2. I thought that scene was really cool. I really like that scene. It's quite funny because it's, you know, there's that whole thing of, I was there, you were there when I married my wife, and you were there when I married my 4 wives. Like, that's quite a funny line. But that scene also has quite a heartbreaking point to it too, because obviously, you know, someone has finally talked to Davos about his son dying, and you can see Davos is very hurt by it. And the fact of, like, he has so much regret because he realizes that, you know, if we hadn't gone into battle, my son would never have died.
Oh yeah, of course.
And it's like, it just feels like Davos has lost everything. You know, he's at his lowest point.
Oh yeah, this is definitely his lowest point, for sure.
And I like the fact that Salador Saan says, you know, I'm not going to be investing in Stannis again because you lost this war.
Yeah, he considers the war over.
Yeah.
Because pretty much lost everything.
And I like the detail of, like, if you go there and you fail, you get burned. If you go there and you succeed, you get burned. You know, he's basically saying if you go to Dragonstone, you're a dead man. But of course, Davos goes there anyway because he's just so driven by his belief in Stannis Baratheon. It's quite a toxic, like, king-hand relationship, if you know what I mean.
It is.
In the sense that, like, Davos believes in this man, but he can't give him what he wants. But he's willing to just keep trying. It's very interesting. But I think beyond that, firstly, I want to mention I love the fact that we now get to see Dragonstone in the daylight. We get to see the full castle, which was cool.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I think my other favourite moment with Davos was when he's talking to the Red Woman about, you know, how the Red Woman says, you know, I burn your men in the fire, because obviously she's, you know, worships the Lord of Light, and she is connected with fire. But I like the fact of her saying, you know, we didn't win and I wasn't there, and you were the only person that told our king to stop me from coming. Basically saying, if you let me come, then we would have won the war. And Stannis believes her. And I like the fact that Davos is like, she's right, because she wasn't there, and Davos has no reason to doubt that because he was the one that ordered it. And then, of course, she gets massively under her skin when she talks about his son dying. And then she says, obviously, as I told your son, death by fire is the purest form, which she did. We saw it on screen in season 2 when there was a scene where they were leaving the room and she whispered in Malthus's ear, death by fire is the purest form, and he looks a bit confused, and that was foreshadowing his death in Blackwater, so she knew it was coming, which is interesting. An interesting detail that she knew that his death was coming, which means that she could foresee that they would lose the war, but she didn't tell Stannis. So you can... That pretty much reveals that she is not saying everything that she knows.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, Davos very triggered by the fact that she mentioned his son's death. But as it's established, Stannis Baratheon is only talking to her. He's not even talking to his wife. He's not talking to anyone but her. I thought that whole scene was very interesting. What did you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I thought it was a very interesting scene. And obviously now Davos is a prisoner and is probably on assumingly borrowed time right now.
Yeah, I mean, Stannis has no reason not to kill him, and obviously, like they established, they've been burning bodies at the moment.
Yeah, who are claiming that the Red Woman, or whatever they call her, like, they're all claiming she's like a demon. Which, from what we've seen, it wouldn't be far-fetched.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've talked before about how Davos and Melisandre are almost like the angel and devil on Stannis' shoulders.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it seems like right now that Stannis is fully like engulfed in like the devil.
Yeah, well, he believed in his angel during the Battle of Blackwater and lost, so he only has his other side to look to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think just for me, that whole dynamic between Stannis the Red Woman and Davos Seaworth is just one of the most interesting in the whole show.
Yeah, it is for sure right now.
And I like the way that Stannis, you could see so much on his face without that many words. He didn't even have to say that much for you to know what he was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the fact that he didn't even want to look at Davos. He just wanted to look out the window. Well, not the window, that he wanted to look outside. He wanted to look away from him.
Yeah.
And also the fact, did you notice that Stannis is now getting grey hair? Like his hair's going grey, which shows that he's like aging because of all this war and this stress.
He is. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Shall we move on from Dragonstone?
Sure.
Alright, let's go to Harrenhal with Robb Stark.
Yeah, very brief scene looking over the like destruction of Harrenhal with so many people dead. And
obviously, when they left there, the mountain just went ahead and massacred a bunch of people and then left it for dead.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's established that Robb's come all the way to Harrenhal, so he's gotten quite far south. Like, Harrenhal's pretty close to King's Landing, so Robb is very close to King's Landing now.
Yeah.
But in fact, if we base it off what we got in Season 2, he's potentially 2 days horse ride from King's Landing.
Really? So he's very close. That's for sure.
Yes. And there was a little brief scene with Roose Bolton and Rickard Karstark, and I like how
it was.
This scene established that, he didn't want to say it to their faces like publicly, but behind their backs he was essentially saying to Karstark that his house is behind Robb, not Catelyn. Firmly. I think one detail to say about Roose Bolton is the way I would describe that actor, he's almost like a combination of Charles Dance and Daniel Craig. If you look at him, like he looks like Daniel Craig if he was more like older and like, if you know what I mean. He looks very similar, but he's not. He's obviously not like a, he's not like chiseled James Bond like Daniel Craig is. He's very weathered, but he has a very similar look to Daniel Craig.
Yeah, he does.
But I like how, I think Bruce Bolton is a very interesting character because his house represents the flayed man. Like, they are literally people that tear the skin off flesh, and yet he is so gentlemanly and composed. He's not crazed at all. He's very headstrong, and he's very clever, but I think it's very clear that he just doesn't think much of it. It's just normal for him. Like, the sight of death, like the sight of these bodies in Harrenhal is very normal for him. It's just like any other day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, Rob has now said that he is going to lock his mother in a cell at Harrenhal, which is quite dark.
Yeah. Yeah, considering the whole thing of her being an actual prisoner right now.
Yeah. And then one very interesting detail is they discover a body that is still alive. And it is Qyburn. Are you aware of who this character is?
No, not really.
Okay. Well, I suppose you find out more about him. But I like the detail of, because Tazer is a nurse, she helped him, basically, because he was, almost dead. I like the fact that she was like saying, you're lucky to be alive, and like she was using her medical equipment to help him, which makes sense considering she's a nurse, so it was applicable for the situation. But yeah, I will have more to say about that moment when we see Qyburn in the future, because he does play quite an important role, and if Rob hadn't chosen to save him here, a lot would be quite different with the story going forward.
Yeah.
Just gonna lay that on the table. Like, just want to say Qyburn is quite an important character, and he almost died here, and events would be very, very different going forward if Rob had chosen to let him die. So
yeah,
this for me is showing the potential for Rob's kind heart, mercy, and just overall point of view on life having interesting consequences. That's all I'm going to say. But yeah, we'll get more on Qyburn, in other episodes. But yeah, I thought that seems really interesting. I like the fact that Harrenhal is still around, because I thought it was one of the strongest locations in Season 2. I just really like the way it looks. It's just really interesting cinematically, and it's interesting that I think the reason why Rob has gone there is because that's where Tywin was, so he was marching on Tywin, but now that Tywin has gone to King's Landing, Rob can now take that castle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it just makes sense for that to be the starting point for Rob here, I would say. And then from this point, you're gonna ask yourself, well, is Rob gonna march on King's Landing, or does he not have enough men to take him? Is he gonna have to think about what alternate measures he might have to take to get there? Is he gonna have to try and convince other houses to get on his side? Who knows? Because in Season 2, Catelyn tried to get Renly on his side, but Renly's dead now, and a lot of those men most of those men are with Stannis, or they died in the Battle of Blackwater, and all of the Tyrells are with Joffrey now, so he doesn't have any of those men to convince on his side. So Rob's going to have to do a lot of thinking to see, who's going to be on his side if he needs more men. Because he's got a big army, but is his army big enough to topple the king? You got to ask yourself that question. Right, shall we move on?
Yes.
Alright, we had one more storyline in this episode, and that was in Astapor, which is a city in Slaver's Bay. And Daenerys Targaryen, obviously, we've seen the dragons have grown in size. And she goes to Astapor with Jorah Mormont, as her advisor. And we meet Krasnizmo Nakloz, who owns an unsullied army of, I think he said 8,000. And we also met his translator Missandei of Narth. So we had that whole section. I thought I think this is probably one of the funniest ways they've used subtitles so far, because they hid some of what Krasniz was saying from us, but then they showed some of what he was saying, and then they showed how Missandei would translate it differently. Like how
I thought it was really great.
Yeah, like he would say like "tell the foreign whore," and then and then Missandei would say "Your Grace."
Yeah.
But yeah, we also got to meet the Unsullied, who are this army who have been... They are eunuchs, so they have no dick or balls. They are conditioned throughout their entire life to be tough, so he showed cutting the nipple of one of them, which was just gross to watch. Very uncomfortable. But it basically showed that the Unsullied are very tough, and they don't show pain. So they are a potentially useful asset to Daenerys, and she has to find a way to buy them. Then after that, in the final scene, we found that there was a warlock child. So I like the fact that it shows that, it's a bit fucked, because in the books, it makes sense why that child is there, because Pyat Pri is still alive in the books. And so...
Right.
So, because all the warlocks that died in the books weren't Pyat Pri, so because he finds out that she killed the warlocks, he sends that child warlock after her here. But because that's not what happens in the show, she kills Pyat Pri, and we never even see any other warlocks. It's a bit like, okay. So, you just, again, like similar to the Sam scene, what happened in the previous episode is now having a negative effect on what's happening here. In terms of logic. Yeah. This possibly a bit less, though, so because you could make up in your head, well, maybe there are the warlocks, but they were off screen, so rather than being a plot hole, it's just bad writing. It's just like incoherent writing. But yeah, moving past that niggle, there was a warlock child who tried to kill Daenerys with a poison scorpion. She was saved by Barristan Selmy, who we haven't seen since the end of season 1, when Cersei sent him away to retire, and he said I could carve you like a cake.
Apparently he spent all season 2 travelling beyond Westeros.
Yes. I like the detail of him saying that he used to serve Aerys Targaryen, because he did. Yes. He did used to serve the Mad King, so it makes sense why he would believe that Daenerys might forgive him. But also interesting that he failed to save Aerys and Robert Baratheon, so he's failed 2 kings before.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, this does play out slightly different in the books, and the reason why is the story happens exactly the same way from the characters' point of views that we have here. It happens the same way, except for the fact that the difference is, in the books, we can't see what's happening, we can only read what's happening. And in the books, he doesn't reveal that he's Barristan Selmy. Basically, we don't know who it is for a while. We don't know who this mysterious figure is for a while. And then we find out eventually that it's Barristan, but it takes a while for us to know. But because it's a TV show, you can't really hide that. So they've decided to just upfront reveal who it is in his first appearance. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there is that small difference. However, I think it's a minor difference that it just comes with the consequence of an adaptation, and the story basically played out the same. In this episode, played out the same, aside from the fact that it was changed in the season 2 finale.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Again, like I said, like the changing of what happened in the finale last season has affected the logic behind this scene, because I feel like if they'd kept it similar, then this scene would make more sense. It's just, it just frustrates me sometimes when this happens, like when they decide to change something small but then don't realize that it's going to have a negative impact on the stuff that they're going to keep. Yeah. Because I really like this scene, and I really like it in the context that it's meant to be in.
I do as well. Yeah.
But we needed to see more of the Warlocks last season. Not just Pyat Pri.
Most probably, yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, what can you do? But yeah, I think it's a really interesting twist that Barristan has now joined Daenerys. And that's sort of the cliffhanger.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting anything like that.
I also like the fact of when Barristan bends the knee to her. I like that Jorah looks a bit concerned. And you gotta wonder why. You gotta ask yourself the question, why is he concerned? And I think if you're smart enough, you might be able to figure it out. Why Jorah might be concerned. Because who did Barristan Selmy serve before her?
Well, Robert Baratheon.
Yeah, and what was the last thing that Robert Baratheon wanted to do before he died?
Kill the war.
Yeah. He sent a raven to what was it? Fucking when the kid gave Jorah Mormont the letter, it was he pardoned Jorah Mormont. Robert Baratheon did.
He did, yes.
And you got to ask yourself the question: is Barristan aware of that? Does Barristan know that Robert Baratheon sent that pardon? And will Barristan, you know, if Barristan does know that and he tells Daenerys this, what's her reaction going to be to finding out that Jorah Mormont was a spy and wanted to kill her? And I think that is why Jorah looks so worried when he realizes that it's Barristan. Because he's like, shit, if this guy knows what Robert Baratheon pardoned me for, then I could be in big trouble.
Yeah.
So yeah, you just gotta ask yourself that question, does Barristan know or does he not? Who knows? Does Barristan read Robert's letters? Or did Varys talk to him about it? Who knows? Ooh. But yeah, I think that adds a layer to the cliffhanger. A very cool, interesting layer to the cliffhanger. And of course Daenerys is just taken aback by it, to be honest. She's just taken aback by it. Anything else you want to say about the Astapor section?
I thought it was interesting. I thought the scene with Daenerys getting shown all the soldiers was pretty funny. For like the subtitles with nice little bit. I like that. And I like the cliffhanger. That's
yes.
for sure.
And with Missandei of Narth, you see that she's wearing that necklace around her. It's very much setting up the whole thing of Slaver's Bay and how all these masters in Slaver's Bay keep these slaves. Like they are actual slaves. I like the detail of Krasnus saying that, the Daenerys is like talking about the baby and their mother. And then Krasnus says, no, not their mother, their master. And talking about how the babies were owned by a master and not, looked over by their parents, if that makes sense. I like how in Slaver's Bay it's very much established that the masters own everything. And this is why they've become so wealthy, is because they own slaves. And unsullied soldiers count as slaves. So yeah, very interesting, I think.
I agree.
Interesting subtext and very much a political system that Daenerys is very much opposed to. Because up to this point it's been established that Daenerys cares about the common people, like we saw in season 1 with when she saves Mirri Maz Duur. Obviously Mirri Maz Duur had a very big negative effect on her because she killed Khal Drogo. Though having said that birthed her dragons. But it's clear that Daenerys cares about the common people, the innocents, right? It's very much in her character to care about the people who cannot defend themselves. And she is upset that these people are being slaved and tortured and killed.
Well, she kind of forgot that that's what her motivations were.
But yeah, this begins the Slaver's Bay storyline with Daenerys, which is a very important part of her character. Very important.
I can imagine so.
Anything else you want to say about Astapor?
No, I thought it was cool. I think aesthetically I really liked it.
Yes. Obviously it's not as, weird and magical as Karth, but it is different. It's something else. So it's a much more like political storyline rather than a sort of magical storyline, if that makes sense. Though there was some small hints of politics in Karth, but it wasn't expanded enough beyond that one scene with the Spice King. But I wish we got more of it. I wish we'd gotten the whole political story with the 13 like we did in the books. That would have been cool. But regardless of that, we are now going to get a political story around slavery, which is interesting. Very interesting. Because, unfortunately, in 2020 on Earth, slavery does exist in the world. So it is still relevant. So, you want to say anything about the characters or the plot in general?
I think overall it was very solid. I think as an introductory episode to season 3.
All right then. So shall we move on to the historical and reception?
Sure.
The episode received critical acclaim. Rotten Tomatoes consensus reads: Valar Dohaeris has overextended itself trying to reintroduce a multitude of characters and plot lines, but is strengthened by its brilliantly acted two-person scenes and 3 growing baby dragons. An advanced review for the Daily Beast, Jace Lacob wrote that the season premiere lacks energy and intensity but provides a necessary foundation, and that the season, like the novel it is based on, takes a little to get going. To be fair, I think now that they are adapting one book into 2 seasons, you're going to get that. You're going to get a slower pace, which to build a proper story sometimes is necessary. Because I feel like this episode very much fits in that same category with stuff like Lord Snow and the Nightlands, where there's nothing wrong with it, but it does a really good job of building up the future episodes, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like every 9 episodes we get one of these. Something like that. Matt Fell of IGN writing that, while understandably not showing us everyone, Game of Thrones returned in fine form with dragons, zombies, and giants. Yeah, the magic was definitely felt here. We saw White Walkers, giants, zombies, and we also saw a direwolf as well.
We did.
So we saw a lot of the magic this time round. Valar Dohaeris was a strong start to Season 3 and definitely picked up the various story strands from the last season, even if it was just a series of brief check-in. She also praised the show for taking creative liberties, which always pay off in bucket loads, commenting on how this can add to Martin's world and flesh it out in new ways. Eric Kane said Valar Dohaeris did exactly what it needed to do by bringing the viewers back to speed on the broader conflict and the various minor character conflicts and positioning for power. The ball hasn't really been moved forward at all, but our feet are on sturdy ground to move forward. He did, however, express some disappointment over how some elements of the episode differed from its source material in regards to the reintroduction of the character Barristan Selmy and the apparent absence of character Strong Balwar. Yes, so in that scene, in the books, there's 2 hooded characters, and they don't reveal who they are. One of them is Barristan, and then there was meant to be another one called Strong Balwar, but in the show they've decided to only have one of it and only have Barristan. So they have cut a character from the story, unfortunately, which is, it's kind of sad, but that's what they've decided. Sarah Hughes felt that Valar Dohaeris didn't really feel like a season opener and that the opening scene was a little disorientating. However, she enjoyed the scenes in King's Landing and lauded Stephen Delane's brief performance. Commenting on the Daenerys plot, she felt her storyline was advancing quite quickly. She also felt that the Barristan Selmy reveal was handled well, as there are certain conventions that work better on page than on screen, and hidden identity trope is one of them. By getting the reveal out the way early, Benioff and Weiss can concentrate on the potential rivalry between Barristan and Jorah. Yes. So yes, there's some small changes, but some of them seem to be quite necessary. How did you feel about the way that David Benioff and D.B. Weiss wrote this episode?
I thought it was very good, very solid stuff. I think anything was particularly bad. No, I think it was all, and there were some really, really great individual scenes between characters. I mean, the prime example would be Tywin and Tyrion.
Yeah, I think they always nail the dialogue for Tywin Lannister.
I would say so, yeah.
It's part of the reason why he's my favourite character in the show, is that his dialogue is always very strong. And obviously Charles Dance, the actor himself too. But like, there's the character, the dialogue, and everything. It's just Tywin always gets the gold class scripts. But yeah, I thought they did a solid job, even if some of the changes are weird. And also, I think the biggest problem with them is the fact that there isn't much synergy between Valar Morghulis and Valar Dohaeris, despite the fact that both titles are meant to link to each other. There are some weird plot contrivances, like Samwell and Daenerys, that I wish weren't so bizarre. But having said that, like I said, most of the problems come from the fault of the finale of the last season rather than this episode, I feel. The direction was by Daniel Minahan, who we've had many times before. I thought he was very solid. I think one thing to praise from him is in the Daenerys section when they were on the boat, there was quite a lot of green screen shots, and I thought he did a really good job of capturing the lighting, despite the fact that it wasn't real. I can tell that it's fake because I'm an editor, but I think considering that it's not real, I think he did a good job of getting it as good as he can. Though having said that, the color grading does make it look a little bit artificial, I will say that. Like, this episode's blues were very blue. I think one moment that I noticed it was the scene with Marjorie in Flea Bottom, how her dress and her eyes were very blue, and that suited for her. It made her stand out in Flea Bottom with everyone else looking really muddy. But I feel like the scene with Daenerys on the boat, the colours were so vibrant that it almost looked artificial to me. Like, I feel like, because you know how we talked about between season 1 and 2, they upped the vibrance of the colour grading, which made it look really nice. I feel like here they may have taken a step too far, like it might be a little bit too colourful. Like, in terms of the tone of the show, it felt a little bit strange. Because if it was something like, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, those are very vibrant, but I feel like that fits the tone. Like, how the grass is really green and Mary Jane's hair is really red. But here there was a lot of daylight in this episode, and it was very vibrant. And, whilst I thought it worked, I feel like maybe some of it was a little bit too vibrant, just for my taste. But it wasn't bad, it still worked for me. I would also say something that's a bit bizarre, because in season 1, when Daenerys travelled into Vaes Dothrak, she got quite a bit of a tan, which makes sense because this is quite a hot part of the world. But it's odd how now that she's come to Astapor and Slaver's Bay, that she's just pale as milk. And I don't really know why, because you would expect her to still have a tan considering where she is in the world, but I don't really know. I mean, I obviously, that comes down to a whole discussion of, well, what's the reality behind where the sun is, because we don't really know. We don't really know the astronomy or astrology behind Westeros, or Essos, or Planetos, I suppose you could call it. But I do think it's a bit bizarre how her tan is gone, and I'm like, but we're still in a very hot location. I mean, it's a minor nitpick, but it's something that I've always noticed when I start the season. I'm like, why is she not tan? Like, why is she so pale when she's in this hot place in the world? But yeah, apart from those small nitpicks, I thought the direction was very solid.
Yeah, I agree.
And I feel like a lot of it is feeling quite seamless now. Like, all the scenes, even though they're on completely different parts of the world, they all feel like they're very consistent with their direction. They seem to have found a groove.
Yeah.
I think one scene that was quite interesting for direction was the scene with Tyrion in his cell and how wide it was and how small he looked in the frame. And also the other one I would say was when Tywin was writing his note and stamping it. I really like the close-ups on that. Yeah, it was good, really good. Anything else you want to say on the direction?
No, I thought it was very good, like most episodes are.
Yes. Alright then, so let's move on to the music by Raymond Javadi.
Yeah, it was very good, as it normally is as well.
Mm-hmm. There weren't many bombastic tracks, but it was very much just establishing music, I feel.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yes. So shall we dig into these tracks for the episode?
Yeah.
Alright, the first track we're going to be listening to is called Mother of Dragons. So that first plays in the final episode of Season 2 when Daenerys burns Pyat Pree with her dragons, and also when she leaves Karth. And then that also plays again in this episode when Barristan Selmy saves her from the Scorpion.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So it's very much a sort of mix of that whole theme that Daenerys has had so far, and then obviously ending off with the Game of Thrones theme as well.
Yeah.
I think it's very solid.
I agree.
Though, having said that, it is a recycling, but it's a good one. It's a good recycling, it makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. The next track we're going to be listening to is called The Night is Dark. So that theme plays when Davos Seaworth is found and taken back to Dragonstone.
Right. That was good.
Yes. It's almost like a sequel to Warrior of Light. It's very much like, it feels like the next stage in the Dragonstone storyline. You know, it's different.
Yeah,
it's a lot different rather than being like a prophecy of, you are Azor Ahai, you know, my king Stannis. Like, it's very much, what do we do now? Where do we go from here? Do we take it further? Do we, you know, are we going to have to start burning bodies if that's what it takes? It's interesting. I like how Raymond Javadi has used the storytelling to sort of alter the themes, you know, to make it seem different of like, where are we going to go from here? What's going to happen now? What is, you know, phase 2 of Stannis trying to become king? I also, before we move on, I also want to mention, I forgot to mention, I like how this episode uses certain things to show how much time has passed since the last episode. I like it, like one of them is Stannis's grey hair, but there's a few small details in this episode that show how much time has passed. Like the dragons growing in size as well. That's another one. Yeah. Davos growing a full beard. That's another one. Yeah, so you can tell that for some of this, like, there's been quite a bit of time that's passed since the last episode. So you got to imagine, like, how long has Davos been stranded out on sea for? Like, he must have been starving out there. Maybe, I mean, there's a chance he may have been, you know, hunting fish if he could, but you can imagine he's pretty starved at this point. But yeah, it shows that a lot of time has passed. Well, not a lot of time, but quite a bit of time has passed since the last episode, and I find that interesting. Because they did this again with the start of Season 2 as well, where they had they showed how long it took for Tyrion to march all the way from the Green Fork all the way to King's Landing, and how much time passed there. So it's the same thing here. A lot of time's passed. Except for the Jon Snow storyline, because that obviously took place right after where we left off. So some of the events are a bit jumbled in terms of time, but it's all relatively around about the same in terms of time.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about the music?
No, I thought it was really good.
Alright, shall we move on to the...
That was really quiet. I was playing... Hold on.
Trivia time.
There we go.
Oh, I didn't even hear it. Oh, well.
Oh, it'll be picked up on my end.
Okay. Trivia. This episode was dedicated to the memory of Martin Kenzie, a cinematographer and second unit director who worked on Blackwater and Valar Morghulis, who passed away at the age of 56 between Season 2 and 3. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
Did some very good work. This episode features one of the very rare instances, if not the only time in the whole series, that Cersei and Bronn appear in the same scene. The reason is that prior to being cast, Lena Headey and Jerome Flynn were in a relationship that ended on such bad terms that each had a clause inserted into their contracts they were never to share screens and must remain apart on set. I think we've talked about this in the trivia before. So that I'm pretty sure this is the only scene they have together in the whole series.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that. Then I think you mentioned that in the last episode of last season.
Mm-hmm.
So now that you said that, they're instantly in the same scene together, just briefly.
Yeah, but it's literally just walking past.
Yeah,
and you got to imagine
they're never
like
going to interact.
Yeah, and on set they wouldn't have like talked to each other at all because they wouldn't have any dialogue together. So they probably would have been kept on separate sides of the set, and the only time they were ever together was on screen.
Yeah,
that's quite interesting how there's so much heat between them that they refuse to talk to each other.
Saw that backstage heat.
Yeah. Yeah. Jerome wanted to get sent to SmackDown.
Because Triple H didn't want to work Tuesdays.
Yeah. But such bad terms. Interesting.
Yeah, clearly it ended on bad terms.
Yeah. Valar Dohaeris is High Valyrian, the response to the phrase Valar Morghulis, the title of the Season 2 finale. Commonly used as Bravos, Valar Morghulis means all men must die, in the sense of all men must eventually die sooner or later, and Valar Dohaeris means all men must serve. Interestingly, the words are not spoken at any point during the episode and would not be spoken until later. I think it makes... Not only is it cool that it links those two words together episode to episode, but I think it makes sense that it's called Valar Dohaeris when this is an episode that introduces the Unsullied who serve, like the slaves who serve. So it actually is quite cool, because also in the previous episode, Valar Morghulis, there were many deaths. So they are fitting titles for the episodes, I feel. This episode marks the introduction of a low Valyrian language spoken by Missandei and others in Slaver's Bay. Daenerys has in previous episodes demonstrated an understanding of High Valyrian, the language which is Low Valyrian is derived. High Valyrian was designed by linguist David J. Peterson, who wrote sentences down in the language, then applied for phonological, semantic, and grammatical changes to simulate Giscari influence and create the Slaver's Bay Low Valyrian heard in the episode. So, yeah, it is established that Daenerys obviously understands Dothraki, but she understands High Valyrian, because she's a Targaryen. However, the people in Slaver's Bay speak Low Valyrian, so it's a slightly different language to High Valyrian. Storylines of Arya, Stark, Bran, Rickon, Jaime, Brienne, and House Greyjoy do not appear in this episode. Did you notice that?
Yes, I did.
Yes, so I suppose you're going to have to wait and see if they appear in the next one.
I assume so.
A few scenes with Arya Stark were filmed for the first episode, but it was later decided that the episode was getting overcrowded, so all of Arya's scenes were moved to the next episode. Well, spoilers, she appears in the next one. But both episodes have the same director anyway, and the season premiere was written by Benioff and Weiss. The same director anyway, so it's going to be consistent. This episode marks the introduction of the non-human race of giants. Previous episodes occasionally referred to them in the context of being mythical creatures, but this episode confirms that they are a real race which survives beyond the wall. In the novels, giants are described as being more ape-like, forsaking clothes as they are covered in shaggy fur. What did you think of the giants, by the way? Well, there was one of them, but what did you...
I thought it was cool. I think you could definitely tell that there was a lot of prosthetics to it as well.
I like the detail of Eirich saying that she's seen a man be nailed into the ground, like the way that he was nailing that wood into the ground. It just further establishes the power of the giants. And it very much says to Jon, it's like if these wildlings march on the wall with these giants, the giants could have a big impact. When Cersei meets Tyrion for the first time after the battle, she says she heard he had lost his nose, but the scar across his face isn't as gruesome as that. In the books, Tyrion did in fact have the front of his nose cut off when Samantha Moore attempted to kill him. The TV series decided not to do this, as it would have been difficult and expensive to achieve the effect, and it would have limited Peter Dinklage's acting performance. Again, that's just another consequence of adaptation. Because in the books, originally, Tyrion is a much uglier person. He has, a green eye, and, when he has sliced his face up, and he's very grotesque. He looks disgusting. He's actually, disgusting to look at. But firstly, despite the fact that Peter Dinklage has, dwarfism, he's actually quite a handsome man. And also, to not limit his acting ability, they had to make the scar less gruesome. Again, like I said, it's just a consequence of an adaptation. But some do argue, some book fans do argue that not having Tyrion be an ugly dwarf with a big missing nose does take away from, the impact of Blackwater a little bit, because it's literally just a scar. If that makes sense. There is significant construction work underway in King's Landing, with scaffolding surrounding towers along the walls. The reasons for this are unclear, given that such construction work is not present in the books. It is possible to meant to show the repairs being underway to the city following the battle, even though during the battle there were no indication of King's Landing suffering an artillery bombardment. Well, I suppose there was the battering ram on the door. That is very strange, isn't it? That is a bit weird. Not sure what to make of that. Robb Stark mentions the Lannisters have been running from us since Oxcross. This is the first time that the Battle of Oxcross has actually been referred to by name on screen. The battle occurred in the 4th episode, Garden of Bones, from Season 2. But up until this point, Game of Thrones Wiki has been conjecturally referring it to as the Battle of Oxcross, based on information from the books. This confirms that the location of the battle was unchanged in the TV continuity. So yeah, there was an off-screen battle before Garden of Bones. And then that scene where you see Talisa cutting off the man's leg, that was from the Oxcross. So that's what they're referring to when they said that. So basically to say that the Lannisters were running away from that point, which reveals, and that was the episode where Tywin appeared at Harrenhal, so it's clear that from the start of Season 2, Tywin was planning on, because he was aware of what Stannis was going to do, it was clear that Tywin was planning to move south to King's Landing, because of Stannis Baratheon, which makes sense as to why the Lannisters retreated from Oxcross. So it all makes sense now. It's all put into place, like the perspective of when Tywin found out about Stannis' movement and how he told his soldiers to retreat, come back to Harrenhal, and then move south to King's Landing to defend against Stannis Baratheon. I think that's quite clever, how that one line confirms all of that. In the second time befalling the Prince of Winterfell that Rickard Karstark speaks about his dead sons without mentioning their first names, Rickard refers to Jaime as their killer, although he previously said that one of them was strangled by Jaime and the other died fighting by Robb's side, without specifying who killed him and in which battle. The combination of the two aforementioned references implies that Harrion was killed by Jaime in the Battle of the Whispering Wood. So the Battle of the Whispering Wood was the one that took place in Baelor, the one where Tyrion was knocked out.
Right.
So it's implied that the other Karstark child died in that one, and then of course the second one was the jail guard that was strangled by Jaime in Season 2. So now Rickard Karstark has lost both his sons, which explains why he's so, against Catelyn, and he's also hates Jaime because Jaime already killed his first son and then he killed his second one as well. So now he's lost both his sons to Jaime, and obviously, he wants to take his head for that, and Catelyn won't let him because she set him free. But the detail of Roose Bolton saying to Rickard that he has sent his best man to find Jaime. So Roose Bolton has sent one of his men to try and find Jaime. And so you're going to have to wait and see who that character is, and if they find Jaime and what's going to happen there. So you've got to imagine that when we next see Brienne and Jaime together, that they will have to look. We will have to look out and see if they get found by one of Bolton's men, because that's what Roose has told Rickard Karstark as a promise to say, "I want to avenge your son as well, or sons as well. I want to help you out." So I've sent one of my best men after Jaime, and Karstark trusts Roose Bolton with that. The new strategy the Lannisters are using post-Oxcross is called a Fabian strategy in real life, so named after Roman general Fabius Maximus Cunctator. After the Carthaginian general Hannibal destroyed the Roman army at Cannae in 216 BC. It's funny, we mentioned Hannibal because we watched World War III recently, where they mentioned how Hannibal crossed the Alps with vinegar. Mm-hmm. The Roman Senate finally realized that it would be all but impossible to defeat Hannibal in a pitched battle. Instead, they wasted no resources on attempts to give battle, falling back and harassing Hannibal's forces to wear down his supplies. Bronn dismissively tells Sir Meryn Trant that he is more skilled at beating helpless girls than fighting real men. Meryn publicly beats Sansa Stark in front of the entire court, also in Garden of Bones. So this is actually referencing something we've seen on screen where Meryn has beat Sansa.
Right.
Tywin Lannister says that 3 out of the 7 kingdoms are in open rebellion. The North and the Iron Islands are clearly in revolt, but isn't clear if he is counting the Riverlands as the 3rd kingdom or considering them as an extension of the North, in case the 3rd kingdom is the Stormlands under Stannis. Tywin might consider Stannis such a spent force that he doesn't counter the Stormlands as an open rebellion anymore. After the Battle of the Blackwater, several of the Stormlands are captured and bend the knee, leaving Stannis only Storm's End and some of the Lords of the Narrow Sea that remain loyal to him. The HBO Go interactive features confirms that Tywin means the North, the Iron Islands, and the Stormlands as 3 different rebel factions. Thus, he generally refers to Robb's entire domain, which he claims is both the North and the Riverlands, as the North. It is also possible that Tywin didn't include the Riverlands as a kingdom, as it historically was part of a kingdom of the Isles and the Rivers, having been conquered by the Ironborn. Interesting. When Tyrion asks for at least some gratitude for his vital role in defense of the city during the Battle of the Blackwater, his father Tywin bluntly brushes his request aside, saying that Lannisters don't do things to earn rewards. However, Tywin himself arranged for Joffrey to award him with the made-up title of Saviour of the City as a reward of his role in the same battle. So he's willing to give Tyrion a bullshit name, but he won't actually give him a real reward.
Yeah.
Because he knows that those names mean nothing. He just wants to calm Tyrion down. The ship that Daenerys sails in was actually a reuse of a prop ship designed and built for Season 2, which appeared on fire during the Battle of the Blackwater. The series actually has one prop boat, as they're quite expensive, which they redressed to represent every scene taking place on a ship in the TV series. I.e. the same prop ship was also Fury and Black Betha in the Battle of the Blackwater. The ship was constructed in Banbridge, Northern Ireland, and wouldn't have been made in sense to move it for scenes entirely set up on the ship. So all of Daenerys' scenes on the ship were filmed in Northern Ireland. This makes it the only scene Emilia Clarke filmed in Northern Ireland instead of Morocco for Season 3. Filming for the scene took only 1 day. I'm just wondering, oh no, because we don't actually see the ship other than it being in the background for the Davos scene, so it's probably like CGI.
Mm-hmm. Most probably.
Yeah. Viewership. Now, what did we get last time on the finale? Remember, it went really down for Blackwater because of the holiday, and it went to 3.3?
I think it got to 4 million.
Let's see. It got to 4.2 overnight. And that was our all-time high. So now for the new season, for Valar Dohaeris, our overnight rating is 4.4. And 6.7 overall.
That's a big jump.
It's a big jump. So, give your conclusion and rating out of 10 for Valar Dohaeris.
Thought it was solid. Thought it was a good introduction to this season. I think it had a pretty much good scenes throughout and 1 or 2 really good scenes. I think it did a good job just putting everybody where they are for the upcoming season. I think I'm probably going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. Just think it's, comparing it to everything else, I think it's just solid. Some solid stuff, I would say.
Yep, I'm very much the same. It was very solid. There was a couple of little contrivances as a result of last season's finale, but they're not at the fault of this episode as much, I think. But I think in terms of what this episode did by itself, I thought it was very strong. And there were a couple of great scenes, one of them being with Tywin Lannister. I thought that was great. I love seeing Davos, how his return was dealt with. I thought that was great. The introduction of Astapor and the Unsullied was something new. Mance Rayder we got introduced to, and Tormund Giantsbane. That was all good. And we also got some more storyline with Robb. That was interesting. The introduction of Qyburn was very good. I liked that, how he was on the brink of death and they saved him. That's a very interesting way to introduce a character. And overall, I thought it was very strong. I thought Tyrion's anxieties were good, and the Marjorie scenes where she is trying to convince the children was fantastic, and the Red Woman very much asserting her power in the world. I really liked. So overall, I thought it was very solid, and like you, I'm also going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. All right. So, anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I think it was just a really good episode. It's very good.
Very good. Yes. Well, all we can say is that next time we're going to be watching episode 2, which is called Dark Wings, Dark Words.
Ooh.
So, we will see you all next time.